In January 2026, a company that owned 18 restaurant brands collapsed under roughly $1.3 billion of debt. Fatburger, Johnny Rockets, Round Table Pizza, Twin Peaks, over 2,200 locations worldwide, folded into one empire by a single man. And here is the strange part. Federal prosecutors say the man behind it had run almost this exact play once before, decades earlier. His name is Andy Wiederhorn. He built Fat Brands into one of the fastest-growing restaurant companies in America. Burger chains, pizza chains, steakhouses, cookie shops, all swallowed into one holding company. Months before the bankruptcy, the company was still announcing expansion, at least 40 new Fatburger locations planned in Florida alone. Then the debt was called, and the whole thing came down in a matter of weeks. To understand why it fell, you have to follow the money, because investigators say millions were not going where shareholders thought. This is a story about loans that were never meant to be repaid, told twice, 30 years apart. To follow the money properly, you have to go back 3 decades to a finance company almost nobody remembers. In the 1990s, Andy Wiederhorn ran a finance company in Oregon called Wilshire Credit Corporation. Prosecutors later said this is where the pattern began, paying himself millions of dollars in the form of shareholder loans. Loans he ultimately never repaid. By the government's count, some $65 million of his debts to that company were simply forgiven. In 2004, he pleaded guilty to filing a false tax return and paying an illegal gratuity to an associate. He served more than a year in federal prison. His first empire was gone, and his name seemed finished. For most executives, a federal sentence is the end of the story. For Wiederhorn, it was only the intermission. Because after prison, he went straight back into business, and this time he picked an industry everyone understands. Burgers. Familiar, beloved, and everywhere. The perfect foundation for a second act nobody saw coming. The question was never whether he could rebuild. It was how fast and with whose money. In 2017, Wiederhorn took a new company public. He called it Fat Brands, fresh, authentic, tasty. Its first jewel was Fatburger, the Los Angeles chain. But the real story was hiding in the ownership chart. After the initial public offering, his private company, Fog Cutter Capital, still owned 80% of FAT Brand. Remember the name Fog Cutter. It sits quietly at the center of everything that happens next. Then came the shopping spree. In 2021 alone, Fat Brands bought 4 companies in 5 months. Global Franchise Group, Twin Peaks, Fazoli's, Native Grill and Wings, each purchase bigger and bolder than the last. By September 2023, 14 acquisitions in 3 years, ending with the steakhouse chain Smoky Bone. One of those names, Twin Peaks, will come back at the very end of this story, in the strangest scene of all. Nearly every purchase was fueled by borrowing. Over $1 billion of debt stacked onto a burger company. The empire looked unstoppable. But regulators say that while FAT was buying restaurants, its own cash was quietly leaving. Start with the number prosecutors used. $47 million, taken between 2010 and 2021. taken, the indictment says, in the form of shareholder loans that behaved like nothing of the sort. According to the charges, Wiederhorn set the amounts, the timing, and the forgiveness himself, without telling his own directors. He paid no interest, prosecutors said. The loans were periodically forgiven. He stood on both sides of every deal. The pipe, investigators said, was Fog Cutter. Fat lent to Fog Cutter, and Fog Cutter lent onward to him. The SEC says almost $27 million of FAT's cash went to his personal expenses in under 4 years. That figure equaled roughly 40% of the company's revenue, nearly half of everything the restaurants earn. The alleged purchases: private jets, luxury vacations, jewelry, a Rolls-Royce Phantom, and one grand piano. Some transfers, the indictment says, went straight from company accounts to his personal credit card bills. At times, regulators allege, the company was left without enough cash to pay its own bills. So who kept the company alive? According to the SEC, his own son, wiring over $9 million back in. But investigators say that money originated with FAT itself, routed through credit cards the company was paying. In December 2021, police raided his son's home. By early 2022, the investigation was public. And in March 2023, before stepping down as CEO, Wiederhorn replaced most of the board of directors. The new slate included 3 of his own children. The former chairman refused to be reappointed and walked away. In May 2024, a federal grand jury indicted him: wire fraud, tax evasion, certifying faulty financial report. There was one more charge from his past: possessing a firearm as a previously convicted felon. The stock fell 27%. Wiederhorn maintained his innocence, saying he had relied on world-class experts in everything. Then the case ended, but not with a verdict, and not in a courtroom. Months after the company donated $100,000 to the Presidential Inauguration Fund, the lead prosecutor was fired. That prosecutor later claimed his dismissal followed a smear campaign led by Wiederhorn himself. The claim was never tested. In July 2025, the government dropped every criminal charge. The stock rose. He said he was focused on growth. He had beaten the case. But there was one thing no dismissal could make disappear: the debt. $1.26 billion, declared immediately due in January 2026, against about $2 million of cash. Weeks later, Fat Brands filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in Texas. Shares fell 45% in a day. Shares fell 45% in a single day. The empire of 18 brands was now in the hands of a judge. Then came the final scene. Bondholders holding nearly $1 billion of debt moved to suspend Wiederhorn. They said that within 48 hours of the first hearing, he sold 9 million Twin Peaks shares without court approval. The restaurants stay open, the brands survive. The debt gets restructured by a court, piece by piece. Criminal charges can be dropped. Lawsuits can settle. But interest does not read the news, and borrowed billions stay owed. The empire was not killed by a verdict. It was killed by arithmetic. Next, the merger that bankrupted American luxury.